All right, it is 10 a.m. Hello to everyone joining us for this webinar Wednesday. My name is Sharon and I'm with SIPA, the Statewide Internet Portal Authority. Today's webinar is with the team from OGX, Alvin McCullough, founder and managing partner, John McDermott, principal, Abby Pint, chief marketing officer, and Tori Copeland, consultant, who have an exciting presentation for us on artificial intelligence governance, a public sector perspective. Before we get started, please go ahead and turn on captioning if you need or desire it, and note that during this webinar, you are muted. If you have questions or would like to communicate with the presenters at any point during the webinar, please use the chat box or Q&A feature. We will unmute everyone at the end for any remaining questions. We'll also have some poll questions for you to answer during the presentation and a post-webinar survey, and deeply appreciate your feedback. Please welcome our guests, Alvin, John, Abby, and Tori. We greatly appreciate their time and look forward to what they have to share. Also on the call is SIPA's Sales and Marketing Director, Beth Justice, and Operations Specialist, Heather Nelson, if you have any questions for us. Thank you all for joining us today. And with that, I turn it over to the OGX team.
All right. Thank you, Sharon. And thanks to all of you again for joining us today. Just to jump right in, I would like to draw your attention to this quote by Dr. Kai-Fu Lee. Kai-Fu Lee happens to be one of the foremost authority on anything AI related. He's written 2 phenomenal books that I strongly recommend, that if you haven't read and you're interested in this space, I would strongly recommend that you read. One is The AI Superpower, which I believe he released in 2018, where he had some bold predictions. And those are things that are beginning to come through today. Last year, he released another book called AI 2041. Again, another phenomenal with some bold prediction as to what is going to happen within the industry and what we'll see of this technology. But this quote primarily talks about the fact that AI is going to change the world more than anything in the history of mankind, more than electricity. So if you recall, what basically powered us all the way through the Industrial Revolution to the 21st century was electricity. And if we're looking at how AI is going to have that profound impact, I believe that we all should be paying some attention to this. So once again, welcome to all of you. Thanks for participating and joining us on this wonderful discussion and topic, this topic that is extremely important than a lot of people are talking about today. My name is Alvin McCullough. I'm with OGX Consulting. We're a technology and management consultant firm based here in Denver, Colorado. There are 3 things that we do pretty well. We do strategy, technology, and we also work on transformation projects. So of AI being one of the exponential transformational technology that we're currently looking at as well. At the beginning of a couple of weeks ago, I had the chance to read an article, that was shared by one of my colleagues here. John sent me this article, and I thought it was pretty powerful. It was about, would AI fix work? And that was one of the key things that we've talked about extensively within the industry, how AI is going to displace work and jobs will be displaced and all of that. But Satya Nadella in this article talks about the fact that the new generation of AI will remove the drudgery of work and unleash creativity. This is something that I believe is coming true for many of us today as we begin to think about how we are beginning to be a little bit more creative, as we begin to think through some of the challenges and things in the past that we once had to deal with. That being said, there was another quote again from another famous author that I also like a lot. His name is Adam Grant. He's a professor at Wharton. And he talked about the fact that with regards to where we are today as a people, with regards to how things are progressing, people are not really worried about how AI is going to get them out of work per se or take away their jobs. Primarily, they're more concerned about how AI will be able to be used to rescue them from burnouts. And there are a lot of opportunities that exist within this whole space as we begin to see that. But again, I believe that AI has set us on a course where we're beginning to unleash some major potential and opportunities that are out there for us in so many ways. So one of the things that we'd like to talk about is that AI has been around for a long time. Artificial intelligence is not new to us. As you can see from this timeline that we pulled together, back in 1955, that was the first time we started to, the phrase artificial intelligence was coined. In 1966, MIT released this chatbot called Eliza, primarily that was supposed to have interaction with like a psychotherapist. As you can see that we've pulled through in 2011, quite recently, Apple was also able to release the intelligent speech assistant that is now integrated into most of our phones that we call Siri, that most of us happens to have. Watson also came up, the supercomputer that was developed by IBM, and they were able to beat the two champions in jeopardy. And that was another huge progress, again, with regards to cognitive technologies and cognitive thinking within machines that were able to get us this far. In 2014, Amazon released Alexa, which became more of a virtual assistant that happens to be in most of our homes today. We can speak to Alexa, and Alexa will be able to regurgitate or give us information on certain things that we're looking for. 2017, which of course was another major breakthrough when Google AlphaGo was able to beat the world champion in Go, a game. Primarily, again, we saw significant leap in that particular area. 2018, that was when we began to see some major concerns around ethical guidelines for why AI needed to be pulled back, for us to begin to start reconsidering how we want to be able to engage with this. So the EU pretty much established some guidelines, and ever since then, they've been on the forefront of trying to manage, guide, regulate, and bring some of these things to bear. Last year, November to be exact, was one of the most breakthrough years that significantly accelerated our discussion around AI when OpenAI released the early versions of ChatGPT that has now become the most talked about technology today, that has now become the most revolutionary piece of technology that we've seen in a long time to come. What was most amazing, within 5 days, they had over 1 million people download that particular application. And of course, that had a profound impact on redefining where we are today. So as we go forward, we believe that we're at a point right now where we're beginning to see the arrival of what we would like to call the AI age. If you read the book by Kai-Fu Lee, he talks about this many years ago, but now I believe that we're now at the cusp of saying this. And here are some of the things that we believe that AI will continue to do and have significant impact and profound impact on our lives. So when you look at it, from an economic perspective, according to the World Economic Forum, the projection is that by 2030, AI-generated solutions and technology will contribute pretty close to about $15.7 trillion, right? So think about it. One technology that happens to have that profound impact is going to change the way that we will increase productivity. It's going to also create new market, and it's also automation is going to be one of the big things that's going to have profound impact. From a societal perspective, we believe that AI will be fully integrated into many things that we're doing today. So we will be able to walk up to cars, talk to them, and there will certain things will be able to happen as we see happening today in certain areas. But as we move forward, there's some major concern around ethics and fairness. Once again, that's another area, again, that we need to be mindful of, considering the fact that AI happens to, is dependent upon a large sum of data. We want to make sure that whatever is going on, there is some level of fairness. We want to be able to reduce bias, discrimination, and all of these different adverse effects that can also emerge. Security and privacy is another area, again, that we see significant impact around. How secure are these technologies that we're currently, around artificial intelligence that is being deployed today, for us to be able to consider? The sense of privacy is another one again. You have your data out there. Is AI going to respect your privacy? What are you going to do about that? Regulations, we'll talk about this a little bit more, has become one of the biggest discussions today. And I'm sure that you guys have seen a whole lot in the news. We'll certainly go over that, the call for us to begin to start regulating AI. Education is another piece again. As work begins to transform, or as we like to refer to it, as work begins to move in different direction, where I don't believe that work will be destroyed. They create significant opportunities for us to be able to grow our skill set, train ourselves to become a little bit better at how we can use this particular technology to advance the well-being of mankind. So these are some of the things that we believe that AI will have profound impact around. At this time, we'd like to have our first poll question. So I will turn it back over to Sharon.
That poll is launched, so if you could answer for us, and then we'll discuss the results in a couple of seconds. All right. There we go. Moderately looks to be the biggest answer.
Okay. All right. So great. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We'll certainly proceed with the next level of discussions here. So I'm sure most of you have been aware of the fact that, I mean, if you've been listening to the news, you've heard about the call in recent times for us to begin to start thinking AI. A couple of months ago, a couple of weeks ago, I should say, Elon Musk, along with pretty close to about over 1,000 tech executives, raised concern about the fact that there is a need for us to put a moratorium on the development of AI, especially based on this language model like ChatGPT and the kind of advancement that is being made today. Major concerns about what impact it will have on our lives. So there are some concerns in that area. Last week, the World Health Organization also raised some alarm around the fact that based on biases and misinformation, leveraging AI has the propensity to be able to corrupt and, pretty much provide misinformation in the whole space around public health. Some of these things that we saw during the pandemic, it will be able to persist again. So depending upon who the actors are. Also, I think about 2-3 weeks ago, Jeffrey Hinton, who's considered to be the godfather of AI, resigned from Google because of some concerns that he had around what this technology can do without regulations. Last week, Sam Altman, the CEO from OpenAI, was at the US Congress where he presented to the senators and basically calling for the same action. One of the things that he said, AI has the propensity to transform our lives, and equally so, it has the same impact to be able to have an adverse effect on our lives as well. So there are things that are there that we need to be mindful of as we're moving forward. Great technology, but what are we going to do? Hence, the reason why I believe we'll be talking a little bit more about governance as we move forward from here. So when you look at the public sector today, AI is being leveraged across multiple spectrums. There are 4 of them that we brought up to just have some discussions around with you today as to show you how AI is being leveraged in multiple ways. So artificial intelligence, when you look at healthcare, and I thought this was quite intriguing, the US Department of Veterans Affairs is beginning to use deep learning AI-based models to analyze health records of veterans and also predict some potential risks that are already emerging. In this article that I read, they were talking about PTSD detection, for instance. So from the early onset, which of course has been one of the biggest things that have had profound impact on veterans that have come out of Afghanistan and Iraq war. So now with this model, you can start predicting what some of those issues might be and how they can start addressing them on the early onset. Another one, again, is around traffic management. In the city of Pittsburgh, they're using AI and ML machine learning algorithms to optimize traffic signals to be able to reduce congestion in real time and also prevent accidents. So that's another impact, again, that we're beginning to see. This other one is from Brazil around the environment. There's a group called the Rainforest Connection. They're utilizing AI to protect the rainforest from deforestation and illegal logging. And what they're doing for the most part, they're taking old mobile phones, uploading them with some AI applications. And these things are pretty good at listening to different sounds. And once they're able to hear a sound of logging, they will be able to geolocate exactly where that sound is coming from, send that information automatically to the authorities, and they will be able to come in there and they'll intercept the guys who are doing the illegal logging, and from there they can easily start to help to manage the whole issue of illegal logging, for instance. So we've seen significant impact. There is also discussion about how we can leverage AI to be able to help reduce wildfires, for instance. In the social services space, this is another great opportunity where we've seen some opportunities around using predictive analytics to be able to identify children who are at risk in LA County for social workers to intervene early for them to start helping to prevent some of these accidents and evil things from happening to these youngsters. As much as we talk about the value of AI, there are some major concerns and challenges around the risk of this as well. So when you look at it, there are a couple of them that we've already marked out here. The major ones would be around data privacy. For instance, if we look at how AI works, it's based upon heavy data models that we need to be able to generate, and through that, they can automatically reprocess this, create higher level of thinking for them to be able to provide insight. But the data that is being generated, there are a lot of people around that are also concerned around privacy. So the data that is there, what level of privacy do we really want to be able to have? Would this machine or would this model be able to respect my privacy as an independent citizen or as any one of us, for instance? So that becomes a major concern. Biases. How long will AI continue to exacerbate the current biases that exist in some of the models today, are there things that we need to be mindful of? Job displacement. There are some jobs that will be changed, no doubt about it, but it creates a unique opportunity for people in this space to gain higher skill set and begin to start contributing. So as many jobs that will be displaced, there are studies out there that believe that more jobs will be created compared to what would be displaced. Transparency. Do we really know what goes into the black box, as we refer to it in the industry? Most of us are not fully aware of it. What are the things that are in that model? So having some sense of transparency will be something else, again, that is also of a major concern. Security. How secure are these platforms? Can bad actors, for instance, hack into them and use the data that was intended for good, all of a sudden to use that for something that will corrupt and destroy the world as we know it today? Then we look at regulations. It's another big concern. Again, obviously we'll touch upon regulations as we move forward from here. But now there's the call for us to begin to start regulating, because the potential for this to go in the wrong way that can have adverse impact on the world is also pretty high. So we need to be mindful of that. At this time, we'd like to pause again and go through another poll question. So over to you, Sharon.
Yeah. So if you could let us know, what is your biggest concern regarding AI? And there's a question in the Q&A. I don't know if you want to answer that one, Alvin, but someone asked, I'm a bit suspicious of the calls to slow down AI development as a way for AI to be privatized and put behind a paywall instead of being free with open AI, et cetera. What do you think?
Yes. So let me just jump in. Yes. So that is the concern. So I happen to be in the same camp as you, that I don't think that we need to slow down the development or the moratorium that was called for, because here is what's going to happen. I would throw it out that many folks are not going to slow down. So if we slow down AI development in the US, for instance, and I think the number one major competitor that we have today is going to be against China. China is not slowing down. They're progressively moving forward with this. They have even projections that by 2030, they're looking at the private AI market to be over $154 billion. So these things are not going to slow down. I believe personally, from my studies and everything else, we need to build this as we move forward, but at the same time, we need to be able to consider regulations that will be able to ensure that we're all protected. So indeed, that's another concern, again, that there is a private element to it, that they want to put this behind a paywall where people can leverage it and all of that. That is, there are discussions around that. So I'm of the opinion that we shouldn't really put a moratorium. We should continue to advance. We should continue to develop as we develop like regulations to be able to guide and protect how we best want to be able to play and manage this entire space as well.
All right, great. Thank you. And the answer to poll question 2 looks like data privacy wins by a long shot, followed by bias.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for your feedback. This is excellent. All right, so going forward, so this introduced us now to the next step here. We want to talk about how we're getting ready as an entire community for this whole space of what we're going to refer to as governance. And there are a lot of calls that have gone out there because we've seen significant breakthroughs in technology over the past few years, or over the past few months, I should say. It's been less than 6 months, or pretty close to 6 months, since ChatGPT was released by OpenAI. And the adoption has been so rapid across the world to the extent that major breakthroughs are beginning to take place on that front. We've seen momentum around artificial intelligence and machine learning models. And there is also concern for ethical components in there, be it fair or unfair, and people are trying to use it to their advantage. But at the end of the day, there are some concerns there. So early this year, there was a call again from the World Economic Forum for us to begin to start considering what we refer to as responsible AI or ethical AI. And this is a practice of designing, building, and deploying artificial intelligence in a manner that empowers people in business and fairly impact customers and society, allowing companies to engender trust and scale AI with confidence. Primarily what we're asking for, or what has been asked for, is that how do we look at it through the lens of ethics, morals, and also looking at legal values for us to be able to create value across the broad spectrum within the private and public sector. So there are things that are beginning to emerge. Interestingly, one of the key things here, again, and there are some calls for governance, the one that resonated most with me was the second quote in here around artificial intelligence is no longer a futuristic promise. It is a reality and we must govern it. And this came from the former foreign minister of Estonia. So this is something that we need to pay attention to. So the call for governance, the call for regulation has been something that has been around for a couple of years that now we're beginning to see major impact around. So as you begin to look at what's happening around the world, there are different groups that are calling for regulations. In 2011, for instance, the EU introduced what is referred to as the Artificial Intelligence Act. Primarily, it was a risk-based framework approach for how the private and public sector can use AI within appropriate structures. Then in last year, for instance, in June of last year, 2022, the Canadian Parliament also drafted a framework or regulatory framework around the use of AI, primarily taking the same risk-based approach for how they can easily adopt that to ensure that people are protected, information are protected, and we can move things forward. Within the US, at this point, as you're all aware, we do not really have any major regulations at this time. So what is beginning to happen was that last year, October, the Biden administration, along with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, they introduced or published what was called a broad framework, and that is what is called the AI Bill of Rights and State Initiatives. So this particular framework, there are nothing around it that is enforceable. It's just there to be able to say that, hey, here are some safe guidelines that we want to consider as we're developing this. So with that being said, there are some cities and states across the US today that are beginning to take on this initiative for how they believe that they want to protect their entire citizens and all of that. But again, the challenge here is that we cannot really act as independent agents. We need to be able to think about this as a collective problem that needs to be solved, right? So the other piece, again, with China, for instance, there is not much that is taking place there. China sees this as a unique opportunity on many fronts, right? They don't really have any major regulations, but quite recently, one of the things that I read about was that in China, they had already introduced laws primarily around how they can protect private data, that companies cannot really leverage that to be able to do extensive marketing and all of that. So there are movements around the world of things that are beginning to happen. But now, as you can see from this graph here, from this map here around the world, these are areas where regulations are beginning to take place. As you can see, the EU is one of the major areas now where a lot of these things are taking place. I happen to be one of those who fall into the camp. There are two camps that we could do this independently of everybody else, and we can manage this. So there are some people that believe in that theory. I do not really subscribe to it. I believe with the thought leaders that happen to say that just like back in 1957, when the International Atomic Energy was established, because that's the kind of impact and effect that we believe that this will have, we need to have an interagency, intergovernmental agencies around the world that will be able to help manage and make sure that we're utilizing AI for the benefit of the well-being of mankind, and also put some guardrails in place to be able to make sure that people are not really going to use it in a very abusive way to create more harm than good for all of us around the world. So that's my particular perspective on how we can leverage this and how we believe that this technology will have a huge impact. Now, I'm sure that there are some of you that are asking about why we believe that governance is important. We believe that governance is important because here are some examples of things that governance will easily be able to address. This is a new frontier. It happens to have profound impact on the way that we want to be able to move forward. And there are things that we would like to definitely want to be able to drive towards. So bias, for instance, if we have good way of testing these algorithms that are being developed to help minimize bias, because it will have profound impact and adverse impacts on people's lives. Data privacy, we want to make sure that there are stringent regulations or there are stringent guidelines in place to ensure that personal data will be protected as opposed to getting out there and things can run across the internet and crazily go out there in a very destructive manner. The other piece, again, will be around ethical standards. We want to ensure that whatever is being developed adheres to some basic ethical standards that we want to be able to be mindful of. Transparency, we want to know what's going in and what we can expect out of this as this is being developed as well. So that's another piece. Risk management, accountability, regulatory compliance, and also trust are others that we are also considering that will be able to drive significant value and benefits across the entire spectrum for those of us who believe in this particular technology. All right. That being said, as you begin to think about how you want to build out, or you're beginning to think about how you want to leverage this, there's some guiding principles that we'd like to share with you that you should be considering. Transparency will be one of the first things. that if you're looking at even putting another application upon an AI platform, or you want to develop your own AI platform, there are things that you should consider. Transparency will be one of those. What decisions will be made? What kind of data will be used? And what is the objective of what we're hoping to accomplish? Accountability, define roles and responsibilities. If we're going to do this, who's responsible for this piece, and how are we going to make sure that everybody is adhering to all of these core components here? Privacy and data governance is another big piece, again, that will certainly be a strong piece that would like to caution you and strongly say that whoever is responsible for pulling this together, we want to make sure that privacy rights are respected. We also want to make sure that whatever data that is being provided is being governed and managed in the way that is acceptable, not only to your organization, but in the light of other folks that will be able to use this as well. Then as we move forward, there are things around fairness and non-discrimination. We want to make sure that whatever is being developed have some sense of fairness, some sense of non-discriminatory practices that are embedded in there. So if there are models pretty much that, extends to certain things that have profound impact on discriminatory practices or biases, we want to make sure that we're trying to address some of those things, that the outcomes will be acceptable to society, that will be there to advance the well-being of people. At the same time, ethical consideration. We also want to be able to look at this as we begin to build this. We want to respect human rights and ethical principles, guidelines to ensure that we'll be able to move this forward. One of the big pieces that we like to say, these are machines. We definitely need some human interventions. We need human oversight for us to be able to validate and ensure that whatever is going through, it is there. And one of the key things, again, I will share an example of how this went pretty wrong without any human intervention. So here is the framework that we drew upon from the ITRG. Primarily, this framework gives you a pretty rough 7-step structure for how, if you're considering building your AI governance framework. The first thing is that you want to define your organization. You want to be able to look at your structure. You want to define roles and responsibilities. From there, you want to be able to look at an operating model as to how AI is going to be governed and how you're going to leverage this and how this is going to drive value for your organization. Risk and compliance is another big one. Again, like in most organizations, there are some standards of what we call enterprise risk management. We want to make sure that whatever is being developed would align to our enterprise risk management practices. And if there are regulatory frameworks that are in place, we want to make sure that we're adhering to them as well. So things like GDPR, the CCPA, HIPAA, and all of these other standards that are out there, we want to make sure that we're adhering to them. Policies, procedures, and standards will be another element, again, that we'll strongly recommend that you define what are your policies, what will be your procedures, and what standards are you going to use to support the implementation of your AI. The governance model is another element, again, where we want to be able to ensure accountability. If we build this, there should be some traceability metrics that we can go back and say, well, this was what was broken. How can we fix this moving forward? Technologies and tools, for instance. So this is another piece, again, as you begin to start developing. There is an interesting case study out of Singapore where they have a framework around how AI is being tested today. So you go through it, it's more like a test lab, but primarily they have all of these different standards that you need to adhere to. Number one, is this private data? Is the data being respected? Have we masked the data enough? And you go through a couple of different steps where it touches upon all of these pieces. So by the time you go through that, it is considered to be fair, it is considered to be ethical and transparent. So that is something that is emerging within this space that is quite intriguing again. So there are best practices around how you can do that as well. Monitoring is one of the major pieces. Again, as you build your model, you want to make sure that there is a way for you to come back and monitor to make sure that this is being adhered to pretty well. I read another piece of article, which was based on 60 Minutes that went out to Google's headquarters, and they were engaging with Google. And they were discussing this whole topic around how Google has invested heavily into what is referred to as deep learning. And they had gone in there, and I think there was a question that was posed to Bard. So Bard is Google's, their AI, language AI platform that they are currently leveraging. The question was around that Bard should generate an essay or write a paper on inflation. And one of the topics, so Bard came up with this beautiful presentation on inflation, but it also cited some brilliant sources. A couple of days after that, the folks from CBS went to check out the sources, and they realized that all the sources that were provided were completely wrong. None of them were real. They were all made up. So within the industry, it is referred to as hallucination. So addressing hallucination, the only way we can address that, which is a major problem within the industry, will be around our constant monitoring to validate, to make sure whatever is being produced is accurate, and we just cannot take everything as gospel. So even as you're using ChatGPT, one of the key things that we'd like to say is that make sure that you're validating the things that you're getting from there. It may seem right, you can write a beautiful piece, but it can also be very misleading because there are still biases that are built into it. There are still significant inaccuracies. The machine is beginning to be smarter, they're learning to get smarter, but all of those things are not 100% foolproof. So we need to introduce some level of how we can minimize that. And this is just a simple framework that we believe will help guide us to get to that next level. All right. The next one that we want to talk about is implementing AI in the public sector. So I would like to pause again for a quick second for us to take another poll question. So Sharon, over to you, please.
It is up and ready for everybody to rank the importance of AI governance from not important to very important. And we had an interesting question also in the Q&A. How can we address the knowledge gap between AI researchers and lawmakers who are creating regulations?
So great question, right? I mean, and I think that this has been an old age problem from the onset of the internet. We realize that the industry leaders are significantly more advanced compared to our lawmakers. So one of the key things here will be for us to bridge that gap. Significant education will have to take place to educate most of these folks for them to understand the potential of this machine, of this potential of this technology, not a machine, but a technology. And I think that by educating them, also leveraging, because I don't think the people that are making those, the folks that are in the legislatures, they're not the folks. I mean, obviously, they have staffers that work for them, and these are young, very bright people that if we can educate them and get them to be, make them more aware of some of the potential benefits and challenges along the way, they will be able to go back. And I think it should be more of a consortium, of a partnership working together to address the major issues, and these folks can go back again to write the appropriate regulations to help guide, as opposed to stifling the industry. What are the things that can help promote us? What are the things that we can use to promote and drive significant change? And at the same time, create some level of regulations that will ensure that we're all able to coexist in a very ethical way. So that'll be my recommendation to that.
Excellent. And they said, thank you. And they were wondering if you know what Colorado's regulation is. And there was another question asking about any other states who have any regulations around this. And then I'll end the poll and we'll show those results.
Yeah, so there are a couple of states around the US that are beginning to, nothing has really emerged yet. So everybody is looking at it within their own. There are some folks that are taking what is referred to as the Bill of Rights. And there are other folks that are coming up with some regulations, but nothing has really made it through yet for us to see at this time, based on my personal research that I've done. I haven't seen anything yet, but I know that, you know, since last year, this has been one of the biggest topics now that almost every major, every legislature is looking at right now, or all the state governments are beginning to figure out ways that they can address this.
All right, and there's the results of our poll question. Very important, being most wanted at 68%, rather important 26%, and somewhat important at 5%.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
So thank you. So I think this is excellent around the need for us to have some regulations. So the next step here would be for us to talk about governance and risk models. So one of the key things that we want to consider for some of you who might be considering this now, and this doesn't really have to be, we don't really have to go out and say that we're going to build our own AI. Just from a usage perspective, how can we basically build upon the tools that are there today to help advance this? As we begin to think about it, the first thing that we want to talk about will be oversight. Primarily, we need to set the right tone for how this is supposed to go forward. We need to be able to define what is the goal and objectives that we're trying to accomplish. From there, we want to be able to create a governance structure that will allow us to be able to function freely to ensure that we have most of the major concerns addressed. Our policy and guidelines will be another piece, again, that we want to consider. Defining roles and responsibility becomes extremely critical. The next one, again, based on this risk model, we want to be able to look at the common risk infrastructure around people, process, technology, and that will allow us to be able to move forward on implement our governance risk model. We will be able to provide training and education to the broad audience that will be there. And we also want to be able to look at compliance and how often are we going to audit to ensure that we're adhering to the best practices. Risk process is going to be another one again. How are we going to identify risk? How are we going to evaluate? How are we going to integrate risk into our day-to-day management? How are we going to respond to it? And how are we going to make sure that we're mitigating and driving for true results? The way we will do some of that will be, we need to make sure we got a review process in place. We want to introduce transparency and communication, and also work with our external partners to be able to drive this and move it forward. All right. That being said, the next one here is that there are 5 simple steps that we will consider as you begin to adopt this particular approach and begin to think about it. We want you to begin to start thinking about how you can define your scope and your objectives for what you're hoping to accomplish as you deploy AI within your organization. You want to be able to identify key stakeholders that you want to be able to work with across your organization, because people have different roles and responsibilities. Just like you're doing data governance, how can we identify our key stakeholders that are going to be a part of this? From there, we want to create a framework that will be applicable to your organization. Every organization is different. So think about the framework. If you're in the public sector, if you're in government, or you're working in the private sector, what does that framework look like for you? Because there are different considerations that you will have to do. The next one, again, is training and education will be extremely important. How are you going to train people? How are you going to educate them to ensure that they're adhering to the best practices as we move that forward? You also want to make sure that you're constantly reviewing and you're also improving as you move forward in this direction because of the unique opportunities that are there today. Now, with that being said, this brings us to our final thoughts. The final thoughts that I happen to share here, as you can tell, I'm a little bit more excited about the future of where we are today. I believe that we're living in one of the most exciting times in human history, where we're beginning to see, as AI continue to advance, one of the things that we will begin to look at is just that we're beginning to be at this age of what we'll call massive transformation. The more we begin to integrate AI into our daily lives, into our work, there will be significant productivity improvements that we'll begin to see. In addition to that, the way as human technology begins to interact is going to create some significant opportunities for us to be able to drive this. One of the things that I like to refer to is that we're on the verge of reimagining what's possible, right, around technology. So some of the things that we would like to see is that AI is going to help all of us, right? But at the same time, there will be significant improvement in learning that we'll all have to be able to see there. It's going to definitely boost creativity and productivity. These are things that we're already beginning to see. So for some of us who are now leveraging like ChatGPT, for instance, I had another gentleman that I work with. He's a partner of ours, and his company now is beginning to use ChatGPT because they're also a consulting firm to look at past proposals that were won with the federal government and how they're able to go back again and see what were those things that made them win the contracts, right? So people are beginning to use it in so many ways. When you look at Khan Academy, they're beginning to use AI as almost a real life tutor that is there to interact and engage with you. It's not giving you the answer, but it's engaging with you, challenging you to be able to think through your problems as you solve them. So there are a lot of things that are beginning to emerge on top of this particular platform and language model technology as we see it. It's going to enable others to be able to become innovative, right? So positions and jobs that people once used to think that were kind of redundant, people can now build on that to be able to move that forward. With that being said, we need to be able to build AI and we need to be responsible. So I happen to be in that camp that believes that this is going to have profound impact on our lives. This is going to be extremely transformational, but at the same time, there should be guardrails for how we want to make sure that we're going to use it in a very responsible manner. It was just like the atomic energy that had profound impact, but at the same time, we want to be able to see it as ways that we will be able to promote the best part of it, and at the same time, put in place some guardrails that would deter bad actors from taking this and using it for not the intended consequences that we like to anticipate. On that note, I would like to say thank you again for giving us your time and being here to listen to this conversation on this. And I will now pause and turn it over to Sharon for Q&A.
All right, thank you. We've got another question in the Q&A. You talk about ethical consideration, which is subjective. Should the framework include regulation to enforcement of commonly agreed upon ethics?
That is absolutely correct. Yes, I would strongly say that, because at the end of the day, ethics, as you said, is pretty subjective. So if we can agree and say, look, here are the pieces that we're going to adhere to, and that is what, when you look at the EU model legislation, those are the kind of things that you're now beginning to to look at as they're moving this one forward. So that is correct. I totally agree.
Excellent. Let's see. We have Annette has raised her hand. Annette, can you unmute?
I think I am unmuted there.
Okay, great.
Great. Okay. So Alvin, thank you so much for a really great presentation. I think this has been excellent. So my question's going to sound a little bit cynical, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And it's coming through the lens of the whole, just the United States and a lack of a cohesive regulatory framework just for data privacy and security, not even extending it into AI. And I generally agree that it would be awesome to have a unified regulatory environment or framework for that everybody adheres to. But my question is, public sector has some very unique interests that are not aligned necessarily with the general public. So for example, law enforcement would benefit from a lot of biometric information, but the general public would say, I don't want other people to have that. So do you have any perspectives on how these different frameworks get balanced, or these different interests within it, given, I guess, an assumption I would make that it's really unlikely that we're going to come up with a cohesive regulatory framework?
Well, Annette, I think that's more like a PhD type kind of question. I'm not sure whether
You're
we
a
have
smart
enough
guy. Yeah.
I'm not sure whether we have enough time to dissect that and go through all of the different hypotheses and all of that. But I mean, I'm in total agreement with you that it's going to be very difficult for us to be able to come to terms on a cohesive approach. And going back to your piece again, so think about GDPR or just data governance, for instance, right? The Europeans were almost on the forefront, and they pretty much, and I think part of that is because they're the EU, and they have a regulatory body, legislature that they can easily act upon these things as they emerge. It's not really easy for them as well, but at least they've been on the forefront to be able to guide us to that next level. So I'm thinking about AI within the context of, the camp that believes that we should look at it as the International Atomic Energy Agency, that this is going to be explosive. There are a lot of things that are going to happen around this. So if there is a need for us to come together, there will be things that will have to emerge. So even from a state perspective, we're now looking towards, from the United States perspective, we're now looking towards the federal government. So someone raised the issue about lack of knowledge and people not being fully aware of some of these things that are beginning to happen. So I would say that in order for us to be able to come up with something more comprehensive, number one, we have to make sure that we have significant education that will have to take place for us to be able to educate, everybody around the benefits, the drawbacks, and some of the other things that are there as well. So as part of it, we will now begin to see that once people understand the importance of this particular technology and also some of the impacts that it can have on our lives, now I believe that might set the stage for us to start having these meaningful conversations. But considering that there will still be private sector, because there are those who believe that AI should just be left as it is and people can run freely, and it will eventually emerge where all of these things will converge and will start to regulate and manage it by itself. So I'm not one of those who believe in that. I believe that as much as we see the benefit of this technology, there is still a need for us to be able to come together. And the way we come together to talk about it will be through education, getting people educated about the benefits and drawbacks. In addition to that, taking some practical approach and things that will have profound impact on the well-being of humanity. So that's how I will look at it through that lens.
Thank you, Alvin.
Yeah, thank you, Annette. Appreciate the question.
Does anyone else have any questions? So you're welcome to put them in the chat or unmute, raise your hand, or the Q&A. And we do have another one in the Q&A. Given that AI's impact is so global and does not map to state boundaries, does it make sense to leave the regulations to individual states?
So great question again. And I would say no. I would say that, and I think you already said that, it's international. So take, for instance, one of the things that will emerge, and which of course has been a major concern, is what is referred to as deep fake. And we believe that this is going to happen. We haven't seen it here in the US, but people have started experimenting with this. 2024 will be one of the, and we think, I mean, from all indications, we believe that there will be some examples of that where bad actors, for instance, would take the language of a leading political candidate and pretty much go and put it as if this person is saying everything opposing what they believe in and make that viral, right? And that does not really, no state will be able to regulate something like that. Once it goes viral, I mean, Colorado can say that, hey, you know, we have regulations that bar people from using deep fakes. There is nothing that we can do about that. So going back again to just looking at how ubiquitous this technology is and how pervasive it's going to be, I'm one of those who believe that we should be looking at it, not even from an independent country perspective. It is good that we can look at it from a country's perspective, like the EU, the US, Canada, and everybody else can look at it within that broad context. But at the same time, we want to be able to start thinking about on an international level, what does this really mean and what does this really look like? So that's the lens that I would look at it from, that it should be more international. As much as we want to develop our independent frameworks and guidelines for how this will be conducted and try to regulate and manage it, we should take a broader approach where it becomes something that we can all agree upon, these international ethical standards that will be decided upon. And will everybody agree to it again? That's another big piece again. So when you think about it, let's take, for instance, one of the things, and not to castigate China, for instance, but one of the things that China happens to have is the fact that they have a ton of data because they've collected, from a law enforcement perspective, they have multiple cameras all over the country. They can easily diagnose, and can easily analyze and determine all of these different components. So maybe one of the key things that will come up from privacy activists will be around the use of personal images from maybe CTV cameras, for instance. Are all countries going to subscribe to that? I don't think so, right? So we just got to be able to take this now in a very practical way, be very prudent about how we want to approach it. And I think that if there's some consensus, maybe this might emerge at the United Nations or through some other international or trilateral agency that will be able to drive this forward. But I strongly believe that that should be more of an international purview as opposed to it being done state by state, because that does not really solve for most of the problems that we will be looking at today.
Excellent, thank you. And Chris Aaron has raised their hand. If you want to go ahead and unmute and ask.
Oh, sorry, I also just put it in the Q&A too. I can just read that. So yeah, I work in communications, and we actually have had some recent instance of staff submitting content using AI. I think they were trying to be efficient or maybe clever, but the quality of this, I would just have to say from my perspective, has not been great. And so this kind of made me pause and sort of given also some of the accuracy concerns with AI, making me wonder if we may need some immediate guardrails on this or kind of staff policies. So I wonder if anyone is sort of putting any thought to that, of doing that within your departments, or if there's any kind of good guidance on that.
All right, I think that was a question mostly for the rest of us, right? Was that intended for me? I'm sorry, was that Chris?
If you can answer it.
All right,
great.
Yeah, Chris. So one of the things that, you know, again, I mean, people talk about productivity enhancers. Yeah, I mean, you can easily get information from there. Content can be created. So depending upon where you are, I mean, we've seen content created, and I would say that it wouldn't be, I mean, if you have a style of writing, for instance, and you have very high standards for what is expected, and AI does not really give you the output that you're looking for, there are ways that, you know, in different organizations now can put some guardrail in place and say, hey, we can use this to be able to do research automatically, or maybe address a few things. From a content perspective, we want this to be a little bit more original. So we want you to spend more time pretty much developing real content. And if you want to be able to use AI to be able to add to your research, that would be something that we will strongly encourage. So I think it goes back again to the independent, to every organization. So in your organization, Chris, if it's something that you guys, since you're involved with communication, and you guys can say, hey, you know, going forward, we don't want you guys to generate content from AI. What we would like to see is that if you want to use it as a research tool to be able to help you produce some ideas or spark thoughts for what you need to write about, that would be great. So I think it goes back again just to deciding on what is best for your organization and which direction you believe that you guys want to go into. So every organization is different. There are some other folks that have taken this to the highest level where almost everything is being produced on a regular basis now, where there are a lot of content that are being generated that you can see that when you read through some of this, it's like, man, this is kind of weird, right? I mean, it does not really comport with the way that I would think about how this will be written or structured. So again, I think the bottom line, Chris, will be what is best suited for you and your team and how you guys want to be able to leverage this technology.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir.
And you know what, I'll actually chime into that as well, because I'm more involved on that front as far as communications and content. And with ChatGPT in particular, you know, I think it can be hugely beneficial using it for research, like Alvin was mentioning, but a lot of the information that ChatGPT is utilizing and spitting out to people, I think it was last updated in like September of last year. So a lot of it of 2021. Okay, so it'll be very, very outdated content. It can be a great tool, you know, for kind of giving a nudge in the right direction and kind of giving you know, key points. But I would say as far as input, this is what I want you to type, copy paste and publishing. Yeah, I would definitely advise against that. And it's very rigid. I think you can tell the difference between the human touch and the robot's touch.
Yeah, thanks, Abby.
And we had another question in the Q&A. How can we as public servants get involved in advocating for the right regulations and governance?
Wow. So I think that you have a platform, like every one of us here, to be able to push our, you know, state regulators for them to be able to do what is right and what is in the best interest. So I think that maybe based upon things that you guys will begin to see, what would be some of the adverse impact, for instance, if we have bad actors getting a hold of information that is supposed to be pertinent to the state. So things around, for instance, if we're using an AI platform to be able to administer benefits to needy families and someone take advantage of that and decide that they want to be able to go out and, you know, blow this up to the highest proportion and all of that, where privacy would be compromised and, you know, other things that will have adverse impact on families. How can we be able to become the advocate for what we believe would be the best practices? So some of that would be through our, you know, actions as citizens, and also considering that you're also in the public sector, what are things that we can bring up to our government, not only just to the legislature, but through the executive branch as well, that there is a need for us to take these, because if we don't take these action, here are some of the consequences that we see will have profound impact, not only on the people within the state of Colorado, but around the world. And here are some of the things that we will anticipate. And this may not really look good for you as the governor or whoever is running the state at that time to be able to drive us to get us the right results that we're looking for. So those are just some of the things that I would say that you guys can start doing today, thinking about it. What are the impacts? What are the things that you're confronted with? And how can we start this conscious advocacy to be able to move our state leaders in the right direction for them to consider this as a major threat? And at the same time, not only a threat, but significant value add to our productivity and things that we need to get done, how we can leverage this tool as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Anyone else with any questions? I think we may have covered them all.
All right. All right. So just before we wrap up, I would like to say thanks again to all of you for participating. Again, I mean, as much as we talked about some of the challenges that we see on the horizon with regards to artificial intelligence, machine learning capabilities, and the need for us to have level of governance and regulation, I think that there are significant benefits that we're yet to see as to how this is going to profoundly shift the world and things that we can easily do as we begin to look at it. So I would like for you to think about it within the context of a medical doctor who pretty much is, here in the US, has AI as his partner, pretty much doing diagnosis. And when they go through these different diagnostics, they can easily come up with things that may have been missed, for instance. So that can have profound impact if the AI is supposed to pinpoint and say that, look, did you consider this particular scenario? I'll guide you through a couple of steps just to ensure that our well-being is being protected and taken care of. So think about someone who's even driving a bus, for instance, to begin to start looking at real-time route optimization, to begin to start driving value on how we want to be able to go forward. So there are unique opportunities that exist across the broad spectrum of where we are today and what this particular technology will be able to do for all of us. So I would like to encourage you to start thinking about ways that you can leverage this in your day-to-day work, or even challenge your organization for you guys to begin to start building upon different platforms that you can start leveraging to be able to make this possible in your day-to-day work, because it's profoundly going to shape the way we think, the way we work, and the way we play. So with that being said, we would like to do this within the context of some guided measure. So there is a need for governance, there is a need for regulation, there is a need for structure. And I don't think that it is on call for when we say that we need regulation, but I don't think AI should stop going forward. The momentum is there. Let's build upon this, but let us do it in a very ethical and sound way. And I think that this will create significant value and opportunity for all of us. And I think we're just at the verge of beginning to experience what is unique, and how I believe that this is going to be transformative for how we live, the way we work, and the way we play. So on that note, I would like to say thanks again to our colleagues from SIPA, and I will turn it back over to Sharon for her to maybe add her closing remarks.
Thank you, Alvin. And my apologies for introducing you with the wrong last name.
No worries at all.
So yes, thank you to especially the OGX team for their time and expertise. This was wonderful. If all of you, who we are so grateful that you came and joined us, find that you have more questions after we part, please don't hesitate to contact any of us. We'll have our contact info on, I think, on the next slide if you want to swing over to that one. And then if you want to return to this webinar again or share with a colleague, we'll be getting this uploaded to SIPA's YouTube channel soon. And then you can look for it on there and share that link out wherever you like. We really like to make these webinars as relevant and informational as possible. So we would really appreciate if you take a minute to fill out the brief 3-question survey that'll be sending out to you afterwards. And don't forget to subscribe to our monthly newsletter for announcements of future webinars, our microgrant program, which is opening for applications June 1st, updates on our upcoming 11th annual user conference, resources for your organization, and more. Thank you all for being with us this morning, and have a wonderful day.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks much. Bye-bye.